Good morning. On behalf of the Alliance of Women in Workers' Compensation, I would like to welcome you to today's webinar. Today's webinar is entitled Vendor Management in a Changing Industry and is a live panel session being broadcast today, June 22nd, 2023. Before we get started, I would like to thank our 2023 corporate sponsors for their support on hosting events such as this. They support us not because they want their logos up on a screen, but they support the cause, which is to effect positive change in the workers' compensation industry through networking, supporting, mentoring, and collaboration. The Alliance is inclusive of all professionals in workers' compensation, regardless of career stage, with the belief that we can all learn from and support each other. Our theme this year is Together Towards Tomorrow. Be sure to head to the website for all upcoming events. We're excited to be hosting webinars, collaboration sessions, and in-person events throughout the year. Make sure to check back on our website for all details. And if you cannot make one of our virtual or in-person events, don't worry. All events will be recorded and on demand for our followers. Our Q2 book club is in full swing with 2 books, You're Not Listening, What You're Missing and Why It Matters by Kate Murphy, and Together We Rise by the Lady Leaders Book Club. There's still time to join in on the discussion, so head to our website for more details. The Alliance grew so much in 2022 as we launched several new chapters. Be sure to connect with your local ambassador for upcoming events to kick off your time with the Alliance. If you would like more details on the ambassador program, please check out a replay of our January panel where we highlighted the plan for this year. Change is preceded by trust. It is through acceptance and inclusion that trust will be formed and positive impact will occur. The Alliance is committed to creating a safe space in the workers' compensation industry for women of diverse backgrounds and experiences through a shared culture that integrates various perspectives. This is who we are and who we will be. The time to do better and be better is now. The Alliance understands that diversity is a journey that will take meaningful time to make changes for our organization, its followers, and its supporters. We will be intentional in making progress along our key pillars of change. Turning to today's webinar, vendor management is a key component of any work comp program and can impact your employees' experience and your company's bottom line. Whether it's medical or claims management, legal, surveillance, or more, our programs can achieve purposeful results with the right understanding of vendor management and partnering with the right vendors. Join us in this session to discuss how to select and evaluate your vendors, how to utilize them, and how to manage them in an ever-changing world of work comp to create a partnership for all. Today's panelists are industry leaders with much experience to help drive this topic. They include Pamela Cottrell, Claims Director at Aramark, Nathan Fraley, Corporate Claims Manager at Kroger, and Noreen Olson, Senior Manager of Claims at Starbucks. As this is a live panel session, please utilize the chat feature throughout the session with your thoughts, your questions for our panel, and to engage with your fellow members. Our panelists are happy to talk about any questions you have, and we love to see our members engage with each other, especially about this pertinent topic. Thank you so much for the time you are spending with us today, and we truly hope you enjoy this webinar. Right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are tuning in from today. And thank you for attending today's webinar, which is Vendor Management in a Changing Industry. So at the Alliance, we're incredibly excited about this topic, not only because of our panelists, who you will hear from shortly, but we've also heard from you, our members, that you are looking for more industry-related topics. So we think this will fit the bill very nicely today. So, and one more thing before we get into our panelists, I see that you guys are using the chat, which is wonderful. It is live. Definitely ask any questions that you have in there. We will definitely get to them throughout the session as we have allowed time for questions. So please utilize the chat as much as possible. And now turning to our panelists. So from a very basic level, can you guys let us all know who you are, what your background is, and why this topic is so important? And Pam, I'll start with you.
Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Pam Cottrell, and I'm the Director of Claims for Aramark. I've been in this role for 5.5 years, and I've been in the claims area for 34 years. So vendor management is a very important topic for me. How we select our partners, who we work with is very important, and it definitely affects, the claims program.
I love your use of partners. I think that that's going to be a key theme throughout today. So Nathan, how about you?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Laurie. My name is Nathan Fraley. I'm the corporate claims manager for Kroger. I've been with Kroger about 14 years, and I've been doing insurance and claims risk management for around 20 years. Vendor management is very important to me. I'll use the term partner again. It's how can we use our partners to make a better experience for our injured workers? At the end of the day, we want them to come back to work as well as they can after an injury, and how can we make that experience the best that we can?
Perfect. And Noreen, how about you?
Oh, hello and good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Noreen Olson from Starbucks. I'm the Senior Manager of Risk Management for Workers' Compensation Claims, and I've been a partner with Starbucks for 9 years now. My background is in nursing, and I think that brings an interesting and unique perspective to the world of workers' compensation claims. But it also informs both mine and I believe the company's view about the importance of vendor management. Like my co-panelists, we frequently use the term partner. As you all know, we refer to our employees as partners. But when we think about our vendors in the workers' compensation program and across all of our business lines, partner is a word that we use frequently because it is important to us that we align very closely with our vendors in providing our services in a way that meets our mission and values.
Perfect, and that leads in great. There's also a shout out in the chat to nurses. So yes, that's could not run our programs without our nurses. So great shout out there, and really could not run our programs, as you said, Noreen, without vendors, without this partnership. That is how our programs function, how we are able to drive results for our company, how we're able to get our injured worker back to work, like you said, Nathan, as well. But the work comp industry is always evolving, always changing, and so staying on top of that can be a little bit difficult. So luckily, all our panelists today have some tips and tricks for everyone. So just diving right in, Noreen, let's start with you. How do you select your vendors? Just what's some of your thought process behind that when you are looking for a vendor?
Sure, Lori. The short answer is like all of you, we use a standard request for proposals process that goes through our acquisitions and contracts department. However, before we ever get to that point, we go through a discernment process within our own risk management and workers' compensation teams to figure out what is it that we are looking for in a vendor partner. And first and foremost, that vendor needs to align with us in how we define partner advocacy in workers' compensation. And most of you know at this point that for Starbucks, that means we allow our partners to report their own workers' compensation claims in the same way they might report their own short-term disability or need for a personal leave of absence. That's a cornerstone to our program, and we believe establishes an atmosphere of initial trust in our partners that they're going to tell us the truth and that they really have been injured on the job and that most importantly we get the opportunity to hear what happened in the partner's own words. So looking for which vendors in the community are available and willing to embrace that notion and instead of counseling us against it is an important concept. But beyond that, we're also looking for partners in the vendor world who are willing to be flexible, who are engaged with the idea of mutual growth, uh, targeted mostly on advancing the partner's experience of workers' comp. Uh, I guess anyone that's been in this industry for more than a couple of years knows that it can be seen by the injured individual as both overly complex and adversarial in nature. So when we're looking to go to RFP, we want to find partners who believe in creating an exceptional experience for the injured worker that is both easy to navigate and one that encourages them to trust and engage in the recovery journey. I'm going to stop there because I bet others have things to say.
Yeah, I do love that answer though, because it's very specific to your particular program. So I think that that's definitely key. Nathan, how about you? What are your thought process or some of the things you look for?
So we do a little bit like Noreen. It depends on the type of vendor, whether it goes through our contract department or sourcing department. But if it's an ancillary vendor, not like a third-party administrator,
Mhm.
we look at multiple arenas of when we choose a vendor. What are some of our peers doing? And Pam and I usually we chat every once in a while about different vendors we're using, and would they be a good fit for us? Kind of go back to Noreen's point. Are they a good partner or a good fit for us? But when I'm looking at a lot of the ancillary vendors, what is their coverage? So there's a lot of scoring out there now with, are they great providers, good providers, and top tier? And some of these ancillary vendors, are they getting a little too stringent or strict of I want someone to go 100 miles away when I've got a great physical therapist or MRI facility maybe 5 miles away. So how can I use that and use the technology? So I want that vendor to, okay, I may have the best facility, the quote best facility in Indianapolis, but I've got someone 15 minutes away that has a great MRI facility as well. So what are we doing to be an advocate? And and I'm getting ahead of myself. How do we pull all of our partners together and make sure we're getting the right service for our injured workers?
Yeah, I think that advocacy is going to be another theme that we see quite a bit today coming up in answers. But Pam, how about you?
So similar process to what Noreen and Nathan said. One of the things that we look for that's very important is the partner's willingness to get to know our business, right? To understand what we do, how we do it, and what it is, that we need. Also, vendors who have proven results, right? Reliability, just knowing that they're going to truly partner with us is what we look for, because we know that the vendors can come in and say we do this, that, and the other, but it's very important that we understand that what they're going to deliver, how that affects what we're actually looking for.
That's very close as well to what Noreen you were saying about making sure that your vendors understand your program and that they know like these are pieces of your program that are very important so that they align that way. So going back to you, Noreen, how do you make sure that your vendors are aligning with your values, with your objectives? So I mean, it's great. I think everyone has that same thought of that's what you want to look for. But what are some questions to ask, or how do you know that?
Yes. Well, in the RFP process, it would boil down to those questions that we're asking them to give feedback on, such as how do they measure their own performance? What is their philosophy of care for their own employees? Does that align with us? It's really important that your vendor partners are treating their own injured workers with the same degree of advocacy-based approach that you are. So that gives you a hint that you're well aligned. But we also utilize the process that we call internally immersion to help our vendor partners, especially once they've been selected, to truly understand what it is to wear the green apron. And that can include videos. Also, we will bring our vendor partners and select examiners or nurses or even lawyers into one of our stores so they can have that experience of what it's like to be a barista. I think many people think of the barista job as fun and easy and conversational, which there are components of that for sure, but it's also a very physically and emotionally taxing job, especially if you're 18 years old and it's your first job. So having your vendor partners experience even just a few hours in that role in a store helps them to understand what it's like once an injury happens. And then we also give them immersion into our coffee culture. So bringing them into our headquarters facility, helping them understand the process of growing, harvesting, processing, and distributing coffee from bean to cup, as we like to say, helps them understand that it's a long process that is fraught with lots of risks along the way, and that's a way we help them come to understand, all the various levels of complexity in our business.
That's fantastic. I have to imagine that they walk away from that just really feeling like a part of the team, which is going to change how they do business with you. Also, there are several people I can think of who I would not want to deal with prior to them having their coffee. So I do not envy a barista job. So that's great that your vendors are able to see that as well. Nathan, how about you? How do you make sure that they're aligning with the values that you guys have at your company?
So we do the same thing as Noreen. So for our third party administrator, we bring out all of our adjusters to our grocery stores, our manufacturing plants, our distribution centers, so they can see the equipment and the different tools that our associate, we call our employees associates, that our associates use. We do the same with our attorneys as well, and a lot of the physicians or physical therapists. So we actually work with our physical therapy partners a lot to help us with job descriptions and physical demands analysis. So they, a quote Noreen, they get immersed in Kroger. So it really helps them understand what we're looking for and what our vision is. And one of Kroger's slogans is "Feed the Human Spirit." And how can we feed the human spirit through our partners to help our injured associates?
So it sounds, so for both of those answers, really at the end of the day, it sounds like the building of the relationship is then what comes down to the successful partnership. So switching gears a tiny bit, but on that exact note, Pam, do you have any tips or any recommendations for how you can continue to build relationships with your vendors once you do have them in place?
Yes. So, obviously the vendor relationship is key to success, keeping the open communication, right? If there are issues that arise or concerns that we may have, to honestly, openly address, those concerns with the partners so that things don't, fester or snowball into something, bigger than, they need to be. But also letting the vendor know that they're part of the team, right? So including them in, meetings, seeing them face to face whenever possible, keeping them updated to the changes of the business, right? So just fully understanding that it's a complete partnership. And, anytime there could be, some type of outing or some type of event, or if, hey, everyone's welcome if you're in Philadelphia to visit us here here in headquarters. So I just think, if I would say anything, I would say that it's communication and just keeping that communication open and strong.
Yeah, makes sense. Love team. The team aspect, I think, is key for all of this. So Pam, I'm going to stick with you. One kind of final question in the category of just, your vendors and your relationships, but when does it make sense that you might be using more than one vendor in a particular situation? And if so, if it makes sense to do that, part two of that question is, how do you help them build that relationship, or keep your relationship with each of them strong, even though you're working with two separate vendors in the same sphere?
Right. So, I always say that a little healthy competition never hurts, right? It never hurts anybody to make sure that everyone is staying on their toes, everybody is being their best self and delivering, their best product, not taking anything for granted, not assuming, anything in the relationship. So I think that, that is okay. And we're, open and honest when, we do have different vendors, that are working. Hey, we have another law firm or we have another surveillance vendor, whatever the case may be, we're very open, about that. Or, you can divide it into, this part of the state versus that part of the state. But I really do feel that does foster a little bit of competition and bring out the best in everyone. And in a scenario where we have, partners, say a third party administrator and a managed medical vendor from two separate places, having them present the program, the overall results of the program for the fiscal year together, right? So it isn't let me hear from, my third party administrator and let me hear from my managed care vendor. What did we collectively overall do this fiscal year on the program? And, how did that all come together? So I think that's very important to not isolate or silo the vendors, but to bring everyone together.
I think that is a great tip to do. I think, the chat agrees. Makes so much sense when everyone is working together and see everyone come together. I think that's a great tip. Nathan, how about you?
So, and Pam actually had a great point. We do that with our attorneys. We have different events for all of our attorneys across the US. They find that there is competition, but they're learning from each other of what may be working in this area. If it's Southern California, I have a few different firms in Southern Cal, and they are piggyback off each other of different things that they've learned from specific cases or a way administrative law judges handling things. We see a lot of teamwork come out of those events that we have. We usually do one, I think, every 18 months for not for work comp, but for our general liability and auto counsel. And we do something similar quarterly for our work comp counsel, where we'll bring in a specific state. And right now it's all virtual, right? So they're all invited to the call, so they get to hear different points of view, and we find that extremely helpful, or they do as well.
That's great. I love that. And I guess virtual has made things easier to connect to. So it's good that you can keep that going quarterly.
Yeah.
How about you, Noreen?
Well, similar to Pam and Nathan, I agree completely with their comments about a little healthy competition never hurts, but also the expanded learning that happens when you have multiple vendors in the same room ideating together. But in addition to that, one of the reasons Starbucks takes this unbundled approach is that we also believe that there are multiple vendors out there that have singular expertise in one or more areas, such as we have a third-party administrator that we believe has singular expertise in the process of adjudicating a claim in every single jurisdiction across the United States. At the same time, our medical management vendor has expertise in coordinating medical care, bill review, physician networks, and having a telephonic or field nurse case management individuals who can reach out and support our injured partners. And then finally, our attorney groups have expertise in managing contested or litigated claims. So all of these individuals, we benefit from their singular expertise in their program, but then we bring them together just as Pam and Nathan do for group goal planning and group stewardship, much like Pam described.
So then switching gears, that's everything that you guys are all saying, these partnerships and the relationships and making the vendors feel like partners and a part of your team is a key to getting success for your programs. But let's switch gears and talk about if we have to hold them accountable or manage vendors a little bit, because as great as we know the really good vendors can be, we also know there's some struggles. So how do you hold your vendors accountable to make sure it isn't just they're coming in, doing the bean to cup and then going away and never looking at your claims again until the next in person, that kind of thing? What do you do to hold them accountable? And Pam, I'll start with you on that.
Okay, so obviously the overall program results are indicative of their performance, right? And I know all of us are always looking, at the performance and the results of our program, but putting key performance indicators in place each year, new KPIs are, put into place. They can be, changed as needed, but that's definitely one way to assess, the performance of the partners. Another way that we do that too is we have open items, monthly open items. I mean, we speak usually way more frequently than that, but there is at least anything that's outstanding is accounted for and taken care of and is moving along like in a project plan type fashion to make sure that whatever issue it is that we're addressing or whatever initiatives we have in place, are moving forward. We also will analyze the vendors sometimes down to the individual level. So say for surveillance, if we have certain investigators that are from certain areas and things seem to be going well or, not as well, or same with examiners, right? If we're looking at it at the individual contributor level, so that we can assure that, each person that we have in the partnership is doing what they need, to do. And then, one final thought on that is really just holding the partners accountable to come forward to you with new solutions, right? If they've been in place for a while, if they've been on the program for a while, we can't be just, resting on our laurels or status quo, right? What is new? What is new within your organization? What can you bring to us? What are you piloting that we might, want to be a part of? What new things do you have for technology? So we hold them accountable to bring all of those new things and new solutions to us, and our program.
Yeah, I think that's key in making sure that you have a partner who wants to challenge the status quo and isn't just stuck in their ways and always have been. I think that makes a huge difference within the programs. On the KPI point, I think that that's really great. And hopefully some of our members can get some takeaways here and maybe some things to look at their program maybe differently than they are now. So Nathan, can you tell me a little bit about some KPIs you do use with your vendors, whichever vendors you choose? And then also, how often are you having them report on these KPIs for you?
Sure. I'll start with the second question first. So so we meet with our third-party administrator. We have a quarterly stewardship or quarterly meeting along with a year-end stewardship meeting. A lot of our ancillary vendors, minus legal, will do on a yearly basis. Medical management, we do a yearly stewardship with each of our medical management vendors. In terms of the KPIs, one of the things we started doing a couple of years ago is you have performance objectives. So I'm starting in the last year or so to also ask my third-party administrator to do developmental objectives. What are we doing for their employees to help develop their career, right? So we really don't want to get kind of stuck in a humdrum of I'm in this, I come in, I do my job, I go home. Is how can we help further their career? And that's one thing Kroger has been really big on is how can we grow our future? So I have them do developmental objectives starting this year. What trainings can we bring in? What different programs or different vendors that they partner with that can help educate them to create a better experience for our injured workers? We also have been doing performance guarantees to hold them accountable, not only for a financial KPI, but for an advocacy KPI. One of the things we're looking at this year is our phone calls return to injured workers within 24 hours. So not just initially, but are they being done ongoing as well? Because if there's a disconnected communication, that's kind of where things start to go downhill. And how can we prevent that from happening?
Yeah, I think that goes back to a point you made earlier, Pam. At the end of the day, this whole work comp world is based on communication. So keeping that open and clear, especially with our injured workers, is really key. There's a question in the chat I just want to clarify. So Nathan, you talked a little bit, you do your quarterly stewardships and your yearly with your vendors. I think this question was probably based on your comment, Pam, but Dolly wants to know if you hold yearly stewardships separate from your monthly meetings, but it sounds like your monthly meetings are probably just open items, just kind of day-to-day open items, and your stewardship is where you go over your KPIs.
Right. So we do have the monthly open item meetings. We have quarterly report outs on the KPI and then the annual stewardship meeting. And the annual stewardship is where all, interested appropriate vendors would be presenting together.
Okay, perfect. And Noreen, how about you? What KPIs is Starbucks looking at?
Sure. So our overall KPIs, we do measure those on a monthly basis, and we're looking to all of our vendors to give us information based upon the performance objectives we set. And what we're looking at largely are durations of claims, return to work statistics, overall spend, and as a component of total cost of risk. So if we're going to hold our vendors accountable if they are not meeting our mutually decided upon key performance indicators, and how we would do that is through our cost plus program. We would look at, say, the multiplier that we use for our dedicated and blended desk approach. We would also negotiate on prices for ancillary services, like where we can't have a blended dedicated desk and we're doing a per claim fee, we would negotiate on that. We have not to this date used a performance guarantee, but rather we seek to reward individual examiners, because we feel, examiners and nurses alike, we feel like a performance guarantee doesn't always get to the frontline desk person who is really putting in all the heavy lifting. So instead, on a quarterly basis, we are looking at those members of our vendor partner teams who have emulated our mission and values most closely. And we measure that very simply by, what kind of responses we're getting in our partner experience survey that goes out at 4 months and claim closure. And what is the percentage of time that individual examiners or nurses are getting compliments from injured partners about the help they've provided them? So it's not overly scientific, but it acknowledges that at the end of the day, the most important thing is that you have built a trusting, a transparent relationship with that injured partner, and they are emulating that back to you through their words and actions. And so we individually reward people based on these things.
I love that. It shows that you care, so that you stand by your values, that you care so much about your injured worker, that you're truly taking into consideration their comments on that. I think that's fantastic. And along those lines, because like you said, it's kind of, that's anecdotal. If you are, you hear something from an injured worker and then you are rewarding your examiner. So kind of on that anecdotal side, before we move on from KPIs, are there anything outside of just the numbers that you use to evaluate your vendors, like the intangibles? So maybe they didn't hit all the performance guarantees, but you still felt like it was a good year, or, not every KPI was hit, but you don't see, like, what are some ways that you also can evaluate the effectiveness of a vendor without just strictly tying it to numbers? So Nathan, I'll start with you.
Oh, that's a tough one too.
It's a little off script, but
Yeah, no,
Noreen's
you're
comment, what do
fine.
you think about that?
Really, are they being an advocate? You can't really measure that, right? So can you see it in the you could probably see it in the dollar amounts. You could probably see it in the litigation numbers. And again, they're partners, right? So we're not going to let them go just because they've had one bad quarter or one bad year. And if there's something that they may have had a bad year, how can I work with them? And how can my team work with them to get them back on track? So we work with our vendors on those of how can we make this a better experience for them? How can we improve their program while improving our program at the end of the day? And even with that, things that we measure, we can't measure or look at, or what are they doing in the community as well? So what are they, from an ESG standpoint, what are they, is it something that they may be up and coming, they're not there yet, but we want to be there with them when they get there.
Pam, how about you? Any intangibles you look at?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think honestly that the success of when we look at like particular KPIs, like you said, the numbers that are on the pages or whatever, it's really like a collective. How we got there was really through all of us, right? It might have been some things that Aramark did or didn't do that could have prevented some of the goals from being reached, right? There's just certain things, there's nothing to say exactly what it was, but as long as everybody is identifying, okay, here's where we fell short, what are the things that we think we can do, you still get a feel for the overall health your program, right? And that your employees are getting, are getting the best medical care, and they're getting back to work. And so you have to remember sometimes, I guess, that those are, the most important things. And to your point, Lori, sometimes numbers on a paper don't really tell, the true story.
So we do have a question in the chat. So Noreen, I know you do utilize your injured worker surveys. So you said 4 months at the close of a claim. Nathan, Pam, do you also use surveys that you then can go back and manage your vendors? And Pam, I'll go with you first.
Okay, so at different points in time, we have done surveys. When we implemented like a call center, we would send out surveys to the employees, to say, how was your experience when you called, the call center, et cetera. But, if I'm being, completely honest, we don't do that on a regular basis. We've, talked about, kind of bringing that back. And like I said, we've done it kind of through various phases throughout our program, but not currently.
Okay, Nathan, how about you?
Same as Pam, we don't do it as regularly as Noreen does at Starbucks. But one of the things we put in, I think a couple of years ago, is we're using a surgical app. And it's a prehab and rehab app. And we've actually added surveys to that. And it's actually given us insight on not only the surgery app itself, but maybe any miscommunication or kudos or congratulations or a good job that we get for our examiners and our nurses. We have a dedicated nursing staff that is the crux of our program. They do a phenomenal job of helping coordinate all of our vendors. So we use that app for a lot of our surveys as well.
That's great. I also love the idea of a surgery app. Probably even 2 years ago would not have come up on a panel. So good example of bringing new things to the forefront and using your vendors for that. So it's great to bring that full circle as well. So Pam, just to switch a little bit onto a topic that I think people think about quite a bit, just in general, not even in the vendor management space, which is data security. That's one of, especially for any risk manager position, that is top of mind always. So with all of these vendors having all of this access to all of our employee data and just our data in general, how do you manage and hold your vendors accountable to make sure that that data is secure with them?
Right. So yes, very, very much in the forefront of everyone's mind, most certainly. So our legal department has, various requirements that are any of our vendors, partners are held to in terms of, protecting our data and making sure that, they can, prove to us how secure everything is, and, things that they've done, how they've made strides, in the area. I know there's obviously no guarantees ever, especially in the world that we live in today. But those data privacy requirements are, very stringent. And I don't want to jinx myself, but to date, we've had no issues with that. But it definitely is very, very important, because they do have a lot of very personal identifiable information for a lot of, for our employees.
Noreen, how about you?
Very similar to Pam, and most of that is handled through our data governance program here, and they interface with our vendors' counterparts on that issue to ensure that there's strong encryption and limits on who has access to the vendor system, as well as emails that the vendor sends to us. They're also going through the process of double checking that the vendor has good cybersecurity insurance coverage, and that we are co-insure named on their policies, as well as they are on ours.
Perfect. We have a couple questions in the chat, which is great. I love seeing when people are utilizing it. So Nathan, I'm going to go to you for the first one. So, often our TPAs are packaged with other vendors. And so you've mentioned, that you do have some separation there. How do you choose to, when you want to go with what your TPA has packaged or when you're going to go separate, to make sure that then they can be objective about performance and that you're getting, all the right feedback?
Great question. So we actually have told our third-party administrator, you're not allowed to add any new vendor without our approval. And I usually do my own due diligence of how is my program running now, and then give me a sample of the pricing and the coverage and the different metrics. So, and I make the determination myself. They're not allowed to add any new vendor. I'm always encouraging them to recommend a new vendor to me,
Sure.
especially if there's something new that we may not be utilizing. But I also look at, is this a partner of our third-party administrator, or is it a subsidiary of our third-party administrator where it may be more advantageous for them to bring them on our program than it may be for me. So at the end of the day, I'm looking at what's best for us.
Perfect. And the next question actually takes us into switching topics a little bit, which is changing vendors. When you guys all mentioned RFPs at the beginning of this, so we'll bring it back around and end with that. But there's a question here from Ira. So Ira is with a vendor. And the question is, how do new vendors get their foot in the door when you're kind of already locked into your current vendors, or maybe you're not casting a wide enough net to find out about other vendors that are out there? So I'm going to ask that question along with kind of just an overall general question of, when do you start to look for a new vendor? Like, what are some keys to you in your mind that you think it's time to, whether you're moving on from that vendor in particular, or maybe just RFPing to see what else is out there? And how do you make sure you're casting a wide enough net? And what recommendations do you maybe have for any vendors watching who want to be a part of that net? And Pam, I think that was a fourfold question. So please let me know if you would like me to repeat any of that, but I'll start with you.
Okay. So a lot of times, I'm going to be honest, if we're looking at the results of, say a particular space, I'll just, use surveillance as an example. So we're looking at the results of what our surveillance is yielding. If we're not really getting a lot of video, or we're not able to use the results of our surveillance to affect the outcome of the claim, then most certainly we're going to say, do we have, the best surveillance partner? So a lot of times it's just truly looking at a particular area and making an assessment and wondering if there is the ability, to do better in that space.
Mhm.
A lot of my best vendors, I feel have, obviously some were inherited, but some that I have were simply, them reaching out and, just saying, hey, do you have a couple minutes for me? I know you already have, your program put together, but I would just like to share with you some things that we're doing, or some new ideas, or, some out of the box, programs that we have. And I will take that time to talk to those, different vendors. I mean, obviously we're all busy, and, we can't be doing that, every day, every week, but there are some definite instances where, I will look to that. And honestly, it depends on the size of the program, right? Because a lot of times, at least I feel that when you have like a very large number of employees, or you have a very large program, that not all vendors are going to be a good fit, right? If you're nationwide, or if you have certain requirements. So, I would just say to the vendors out there, don't give up, and to make yourself and your offerings, available to folks. And for those of us, in the industry, we network with each other. As Nathan said, we would be on the phone with each other, and we would get recommendations. Who are you using? How's that going? So there's a lot of that as well. And if you're doing a good job as a vendor, you'll more than likely get those positive recommendations. And then other people will, be interested in speaking with you when your results speak for themselves.
Yeah, that's great. I totally agree. And Noreen, I'll go to you. I'll rephrase the question more succinctly. Sorry, Pam, that you had to get
That's okay.
my stream of conscious. But so Noreen, so for you, when do you start to think of switching vendors, what are some keys to you that it's time to look outside of your current vendor, and any tips or ideas you have for current vendors watching today on how they can make inroads?
Sure. I think I'll take the second part of the question first, especially as it concerns the smaller ancillary vendors, like Pam mentioned, surveillance or perhaps imaging companies or individual nurse case management companies. And my piece of advice is don't cold call me or email me with just a standard verbiage about your program, because honestly, I won't have the time to really dive into that. But what does work is if you, as an ancillary vendor, take a little bit of time to understand the company, our core values, and where you believe as an ancillary vendor that you can bring something better to the table. Pam was mentioning this as well, that aligns specifically with how Starbucks does business, then send me that email or call me with that information. Or better yet, seek me out when we happen to both be at a national conference or some other meeting, and sit down with me over a cup of coffee and explain to me why you believe your service can yield great results for Starbucks. That's going to be the way to get your foot in the door. And of course, with our key vendors around medical management and third-party administration, we are not locked in to using any of their other services that they offer, be that surveillance or field case management or transportation, um, language translation or imaging. So we're always looking for what are those niche vendors that can transform the partner experience. It all boils down to the partner experience. And then to take the first part of your question around when is it time to look for another vendor, I would say there are two drivers here, and perhaps as you, I know I'm going to sound repetitive here, but when we have drifted apart in terms of our approach to workers' compensation and how we uh, uh, emulate our mission and values to our injured partners, that when we have that key break in our journey, then we're no longer aligned philosophically, and that's a time to go to RFP. But the other reason and the more often reason that we have chosen to go to RFP is when our vendor is no longer willing or capable to grow with us on our pathway to excellence. And maybe that's in a data management approach, maybe that's in a claims approach, but when we are itching to do something new and innovative and we cannot convince our vendor partners to come along with us, then we're going to start looking for someone else.
So there's a question in the chat about RFPs, and Noreen, I think that your last answer leads directly into now it's time to start looking, let's do an RFP. So the question in the chat specifically is about if you are intentional with unbundling from your partners. So, for example, if you're doing a TPA RFP, are you intentional looking at a TPA that will allow you to unbundle? So I guess, Nathan, I'll go to you. Just generally from an RFP perspective, what are some overall things to think about when a person is going to an RFP? What are some questions to maybe ask, or a company is going to RFP, I should say? What are some questions to ask? And then do you think that it makes sense to intentionally look to unbundle?
I'll take the second part first. Yes, I think you should look intentionally to unbundle, but also do a tiered approach of what, it's do two RFPs, right? Or two scenarios. I want a bundled program and an unbundled program and see it side by side. And Kroger used to be unbundled for third-party administrator and medical management. And now we have them both together. It was what was best for our program at the time. But I would intentionally look to unbundle and see what their pricing is, and are they really interested in you still, right? So if we're a big program, and I think that the four of us have large programs, so there's a lot of companies that would like to be our vendor. right? Or I would hope. So I would intentionally unbundle to see what that is. And I apologize, I forgot the first part of your question.
Just what
I
are
got
some
caught up in the
other
second part.
maybe questions to ask when you're RFP, or just what are some overall, just some things you're thinking about when you are actually submitting that proposal out into the world? What are some things you're putting into it to know that you're getting the right feedback back from vendors?
So that's a great question. Usually you'd say the standard things of, how are the claim costs, what's the TPA's retention rate for employees. I'm going to go back to, we are kind of like Noreen. Are they the right fit for us? Do their business values align with ours? And even from an ESG standpoint, from a diversity inclusion standpoint, are there minority and women-owned businesses? And I think I saw that in the chat. That's been really big for us in the past few years. And I've utilized a lot of women and minority-owned businesses on the legal side. But that's one thing we'll be looking at going forward, is even with a lot of the other vendors, are they women and minority-owned businesses as well? So where it's not a typical claim standpoint, what are they doing in the community? What are they doing in society right now that align with our philosophy, which is kind of what Noreen started with.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, you're going to get vendors who are going to drive results, because then if their values are the same as yours, you're going to get the right things out of your vendors and for your program. So I think that's a great way to look at it. There's one more question in the chat I want to get to. Pam, I'll go to you on this one. So any types of vendor solutions or expertise that you think are harder to fill than other vendors? So maybe some vendor areas where you've struggled, and if so, any tips?
I just feel like, that there's a lot of different choices, out there. I would say that there's some areas, like I think filling a third party administrator, you know, role is very, is crucial and is critical to, the program. So I feel like there would have to be, a lot more thought, put into that. But I can honestly say that I really have never had, never had difficulty fulfilling the vendors that, that we've needed. We have, like I said, moved away from some at different points due to philosophy changes or just program results or whatever it may be. But I just do feel like there's a lot of choices. And, when you go to RIMS or, other events like that, you really do see all the different, choices that are available and out there. And I don't remember who made the point, one of my fellow panelists, but, it's how are you, I think it was Noreen, how are you standing out? How are you making yourself different from all these other vendors that do exactly what you do? What is your differentiator? And that's what I think that, we're all interested in.
Okay. And then to round out questions from the chat and to round out the RFP. So in addition to the answers you get back, or the proposals that come back, do you have in-person meetings with these top choices to actually verify that what they're saying to you aligns with you? And all three of you are nodding, so I don't need to go around the horn on that. It looks like you do some in-persons with people who make sense within your RFPs. That's great. So the last question that just came through the chat, which actually is the last question I was gonna ask you guys to kind of wrap things up. So I wanted you guys to give some recommendations and some tips on resources or ways that people can think about different vendors or find different vendors when they don't necessarily have a great network. I think one of the best resources is each other. Each of you are on this panel because I put you in my network, and here we are now. But not everyone has that ability. So between, what resources can you recommend, or how do you recommend finding vendors out there? And then similarly, Adam asks, what trade shows are the best to build connections for the work comp space in order to get vendors out there? So Nathan, I will go with you. What trade shows, what conferences, or what resources in general do you recommend?
So from a resource standpoint, networking, your local RIM society, your local, if you're in self-insurance, if you're a vendor, look at the different state self-insurance associations and go to their yearly events or quarterly events, or join one of those. From a vendor standpoint, it's a great foot in the door. from a regional standpoint. From a national standpoint, RIMS, which is very large and more encompassing than work comp, is great. The National Work Comp Conference, WCI in Florida, which I think is in August of this year, it is an up and coming one. In the National Work Comp and Disability Conference in Vegas in September. So is a really good one for vendors.
Yeah.
Well,
all of those, thank you. Nathan did not pay him to say that, but the
I did
Alliance
not.
in-person events at every one that he just mentioned. So those next two coming in August and then in November. So definitely attend those and go to the Alliance events. So Pam, how about you? Any final thoughts on recommendations?
I would say your broker would be a great place to get recommendations from. What are the other clients that you have? Who are they utilizing? What results are they getting? And I know that brokers, very much have, databases on, those type of things like outcomes and, who's with who. And so I would definitely recommend that.
Thanks. And Noreen, how about you?
In addition to what Pam and Nathan said, I would also encourage you to join the Alliance here because it's a great place to get connected with other individuals in the industry. But also take a look at what your insurance providers can provide for you in terms of access to other individuals, and don't discount the effectiveness of a LinkedIn account. If you start following a few individuals, you'll notice that others come away into your view for building those networking relationships. And then, what was the second part of the question again, Lori?
Which conferences do you think are the best for vendors to network at?
Yes. Sorry. Well, Nathan and Pam have already mentioned WCI and, of course, National Disability and Work Comp Conference in Vegas in September this year. But I also am a huge fan of the CCWC conference that happens every June in Anaheim. For those of you that have deep investment in the state of California, it's a great conference, and your local RIMS, of course, is always a great organization to connect with.
That's where we met originally, Noreen, a million years ago at the California conference.
That's right. That's right.
So obviously great things come from that particular conference. So with that, I will wrap up just by saying thank you so much to all three of you for joining today. All of your answers were so thoughtful, but also really great takeaways for everyone watching, whether they're vendors, our members, anything. It's been a fantastic conversation. So thank you again for your time, and for everyone watching, this is being recorded, so tell your friends to watch it at a later date on the website. So thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.